Hi, thanks for joining me again. So today we talked about how to graph linear functions, which is just sort of an expansion on what we talked about last time, just graphing functions. So first let's start off with what is a linear function. A linear function is a function that forms a straight line whenever you graph it. So most linear functions are written in the form y equals x, and then something maybe being multiplied by x or added to x. But whenever you graph these functions, you are going to get a straight line such as the one you see here. So this is the function y equals x plus 1, and this is what you get whenever you graph that function. You will get this line. All right, so how do you graph a function? Well, any graph just needs 2 points, 2 or more points. So to determine the 2 points from your function, you're going to pick any 2 random numbers for x, plug them in, and solve for y. I give you a little hint here that 1 and 2 are usually the best numbers to choose for 1, because the y's that you should get as a result will be manageable, and they'll fit on your graph somewhere. So I give my students a lot of different strategies to use whenever they're doing this. Some students find it difficult to visualize just plugging in and like picking a random x and then plugging it in and getting a y and then making a coordinate point out of it and doing all of that without like visual aids such as tables. So like in the last lesson we were focusing on graphing a function based on a table. So whenever you have something really bare bones like this, like if you just have a graph and you have a function and you want to graph that function, you are definitely welcome and able to make your own table if you want to. So a lot of students may choose to make a little XY table when they're doing this, all right? And so they can organize their x's. So like I said, I like to pick the x's 1 and 2, and I plug those numbers in and I solve my function. Now again, some students have a hard time solving the function without writing it out, so you may want to write out your work. So if you plug 1 in for x, your function will be y equals 2 times 1 plus 1, which will give you an answer of 3. So your y will be 3. All right, and so if your x is 2, you may want to write out your function y equals 2 times 2 plus 1. Of course, you could include all of this work in your function table as well. You could make a third column here. And so once you plug in 2 for y, you get 5. All right, so these pairs will make your coordinates. So my first coordinate will be 1 and 3, and my second coordinate will be 2 and 5. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and plot those. So 1 and 3 is right here. 2 and 5 is right here. And I only need at least these 2 points, and my graph will pass through those 2 points. All right, and so there's my graph. That's what I get. All right. Okay, how to tell if a coordinate point is a solution to a function. So you may be faced with a problem where you're given a function, you're given a coordinate point, and you are asked, is this point a solution to this function? Here's how you would do that. You would plug whatever your x is into your function and solve to make sure you get the correct y. So if we have a question like this, is the point 1 and 3 a solution to the function y equals 3x? We plug 1 in. Remember that with a coordinate pair, it is always xy, so the first number is always your x. So you plug 1 in for x, and so your function would be 3 times 1, which is 3. So your y is 3. So this is a solution. This is a point that would be on this graph. So that's all there is to that. So let's test these points with the same function y equals 3x. So let's test 4 and 15. So if our x is 4, we're going to plug it into our function. So our function would become y equals 3 times 4. So just solve that. Well, 3 times 4 is 12. All right, so 12 is not the y we were given in the point. So 4 and 15 is not a solution to this function. Let's try the next point, which is 7 and 21. So once again, you plug 7 in, so 7 is your x, plug 7 into your function. So your function becomes y equals 3 times 7, and that gives you y is 21. All right, 21 is the y we were given in the original point, so this point is a solution to the function. All right, let's test our third point, 10 and 13. Plug 10 in for x, so our function is y equals 3 times 10. If we were to solve that, that should give us a y of 30, which is not what we were given here for y. So this is not a solution to that function. All right, let's move on. Okay. What if you are given a graph, such as the one you see here on your screen, and you are asked to write an equation based on this graph? Here's what you would do. You would pick 2 or more points that are definitely on your graph. So we have 3 points on this graph identified. 2 and 4, 1 and 2, and negative 1 and 2. Set up an XY table. All right, so we're going to go ahead and set up an XY table. All right, starting, if we just go from top to bottom, our first point was 2 and 4. Our second point was 1 and 2. And our third point was negative 1 and negative 2. And we're going to determine what math is being done to x to get y. This kind of calls back to the previous video where we talked about how to do that, how to figure out the function based on a table. So there were 3 methods I gave you in order to go through this and figure out what the function is. The first is to see if there is a constant number you are adding to x to get y. So if we were to look at that, 2 plus 2 is 4. All right, so for this to be true, we would have to be adding 2 to every one of these. So 1 plus 2 is not 2, and negative 1 plus 2 is not negative 2. So simply adding to our function is not going to be a solution. So once you check that off, move on to see if there's a constant that you're multiplying by x to get y. All right, so 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, let's test this with everything else. 1 times 2 is 2, and negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. So our constant here is multiplying by 2. So our function has to be y equals 2x. All right, every time we multiply by 2. So we should be able to plug in any number for x and get a y that will definitely be on this graph. All right, so if you plugged in 3 for x, multiplied by 2, you get 6. So the point 3 and 6 would be on this line. All right, that is it for graphing linear equations for now. Thank you for watching. See you next time.